Hey Google, play some rap instrumentals.
Playing free, no choice. Hard Trap Beat 2023 free. Trap Rap Instrumental Beat 2023 Dark Beat plus Friedel on YouTube Music.
Mile High Hunt means no change or cancel fees, no matter who, no matter what.
Go for you nigga, go see a dentist. Come to find out the drill I carry is a menace to society. Tooth pulling like the wire was connected to the doorknob while you eyeing me. Huh? The irony. I will snatch and press and dry clean. Give a fuck if you didn't know this was my steam pressed. The situation is just like that. Make moves, chess. Break grooves, put them on the airwaves, yes, that's another hit. Bar for bar, you can take a shot and still not hit the target. My aim is legit, yours ain't shit. That's what I'm saying. No competition, no displaying, just the way that I'm aimed. You can see that thing on the affidavit. Shit stain, they gonna catch him, boy. We out for dating. And save it.
reliability source that a crime had occurred. So someone told them that there was going to be some sort of material evidence in this house.
Recently, Las Vegas police carried out an unexpected search of a residence in connection with a 1996 drive-by incident involving rapper and actor Tupac Shakur. The house is reportedly linked to an individual who has long been under investigators' scrutiny and whose nephew had previously emerged as a suspect shortly after the rapper's tragic demise. However, specific details regarding the operation and whether an arrest is imminent in the decades-old case have not been disclosed. This development has sparked renewed interest in the investigation after almost 30 years. Predictably, some individuals allegedly connected to Tupac's end are now in a state of anxiety, with one notable figure being the founder of Bad Boy Records, Sean Puffy Combs, also known as Diddy. So what's the tea behind all this? Let's find out in today's video. But of course, before I spill anything, make sure first that you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell for more updates and videos like this. Now, let's dive in.
Meanwhile, we're also getting more details on the Tupac Shakur murder investigation. ABC News is learning more about the target of this week's police search and what they took from his home.
An arrest in the case, and police say this new search now, just the last 24 hours in Vegas, is part of an investigation even all these years later into his death.
Recent searches of the property have connected it to the wife of Dwayne Keith D. Davis, a self-described gangster and the uncle of Orlando Anderson, a known rival of Tupac Shakur, who authorities have long suspected in the rapper's demise. Anderson denied involvement in Shakur's assassination and later passed away in an unrelated gang shooting. Over the years, various theories have consistently suggested that Diddy may have hired a hitman to target the Dear Mama hitmaker. A search warrant executed by detectives resulted in the collection of numerous items, including computers, a cellular telephone, documentary documents, a Vibe magazine featuring Shakur, .40 caliber bullets, photographs, and a copy of Davis's 2019 memoir, Compton Street Legend. During the search, officers detained two individuals outside the property, situated in a suburban small Henderson neighborhood about 20 miles southeast of the Las Vegas Strip. As of now, it remains unclear if the evidence collected will directly link Diddy to Tupac's demise, but the record executive is reportedly facing significant trouble due to these developments catching him off guard.
Responding officer on the night Tupac Shakur was shot here in Las Vegas is weighing in on the renewed homicide investigation.
The recent search has injected new life into the long unsolved assassination of Shakur, a case steeped in conspiracy theories. Despite decades passing without any arrests, public interest in the matter has remained steadfast. Shakur's tragic demise occurred while his fourth solo album, All Eyes on Me, continued its chart-topping success, selling around 5 million copies. As a six-time Grammy nominee, the iconic rapper holds a prominent place as one of the most influential and versatile figures in hip-hop history. On the fateful night of September 7, 1996, Shakur was riding in a black BMW driven by Death Row Records founder Marion Suge Knight as part of a convoy of approximately 10 cars. While waiting at a red light near the Las Vegas Strip, a white Cadillac pulled up beside them and shots erupted. Shakur suffered multiple wounds and succumbed to his injuries a few days later. The shooting occurred shortly after a casino brawl involving Anderson, the late rapper, and their associates. Despite numerous witnesses, the investigation soon stalled due to their refusal to cooperate with the Las Vegas police.
Puffy allegedly gave money, I heard, to Zip.
Throughout the years, persistent rumors circulated, suggesting that Diddy may have influenced the police and witnesses through financial means. However, in 2018, there was a significant breakthrough when Keith, after a cancer diagnosis, broke his silence and admitted to being in the front seat of the Cadillac, signaling a potential shift in the case. During an interview for a BET show, Keith D made startling revelations, implicating his nephew, Orlando Anderson, in the shooting of Tupac Shakur. Keith stated that Anderson was one of the two individuals in the backseat of the car during the incident. When he disclosed that the shots came from the back of the vehicle, he refrained from revealing the identity of the actual shooter, citing his adherence to the code of the streets. In his memoir, the former gang leader disclosed that he had shared what he knew nearly a decade earlier in confidential meetings with federal and local authorities. These meetings revolved around the investigation into the possibility that Shakur's murder was linked to the March 1997 drive-by shooting of his rap rival, the notorious Big, a close associate of Diddy. Keith D revealed in his book that law enforcement offered him a deal, protection from criminal charges related to running a criminal enterprise, and several alleged eliminations, in exchange for cooperation in uncovering the truth behind the Tupac and Biggie situations. The authorities reportedly assured him that they would drop the indictment and halt the grand jury proceedings if he assisted them. At the time of their demise, both Tupac and Biggie were embroiled in the infamous East Coast-West Coast rivalry, which dominated the hip-hop scene in the mid-1990s. The feud intensified after Tupac suffered serious injuries in another shooting during a robbery at a Midtown Manhattan hotel lobby.
This is the biggest development in the Tupac murder case since this all happened, since the murder happened. That they never served a search warrant and, showed up at someone's house with a SWAT team.
The hitmaker made bold accusations, openly pointing fingers at Big and Diddy, claiming that they had prior knowledge of the shooting, and claimed both vehemently denied. This revelation created a deep divide within the hip-hop community and among fans. In his writing, Keith described how he decided to cooperate and answer the authorities' questions regarding the events leading up to Tupac's shooting. He admitted that he did so because they promised he would not face prosecution, even though he initially doubted the validity of the deal. Surprisingly, they kept their word, and the indictment was dropped, effectively ending the entire case without anyone being arrested. It remains uncertain if Keith was residing in the home recently searched by Las Vegas police, or if he was present during the search. However, Las Vegas court records indicate an active arrest warrant has been out for him since July 2022, resulting from his failure to appear in court on a drug charge. In connection to the case, some may recall Greg Kading, the LAPD detective who uncovered and revealed new information linking Diddy to the deaths of both Tupac and Biggie. It seems pertinent to refresh our memory on this matter. Diddy's troubles began when Biggie's case was reopened in 2006 due to a lawsuit filed by his mother, Valletta Wallace, against the LAPD. The lawsuit sought an estimated $500 million. Found new information that linked the deaths of both hip-hop's most influential rappers. Detective Kading's final verdict implicated Puff Daddy in allegedly ordering $1 million hit on Tupac and Suge Knight during their rap beef with Biggie. Kading believed Diddy had connections to LA gangs and hired Keith for the job. The shooting, carried out by Keith's nephew, Orlando Baby Lane.
Bruno. Enough. Be quiet. Sit down.
Anderson resulted in Tupac's death and Suge Knight's injury. Interestingly, than he had expected. During his 3-year investigation into Biggie's death, Kading found new information that linked the deaths of both hip-hop's most influential rappers. Detective Kading's final verdict implicated Puff Daddy in allegedly ordering a $1 million hit on Tupac and Suge Knight during their rap beef with Biggie. Kading believed Diddy had connections to LA gangs and hired Keith for the job. The shooting, carried out by Keith's nephew, Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, resulted in Tupac's death and Suge Knight's injury. Interestingly, Baby Lane had a confrontation with Tupac at a Las Vegas casino just hours before the fatal shooting. Keith D claimed that Biggie's then-wife, Faith Evans, knew about Diddy's alleged plot to assassinate Tupac after the West Coast rapper's demise. Kading disagreed, stating that Biggie had no involvement in the assassination despite their well-known rap feud. Kading believed the New York-based rapper was unaware of Diddy's alleged plans to harm Tupac and Suge Knight. Following the tragic assassination of Tupac, Death Row Records head Suge Knight allegedly sought retaliation by hiring a Bloods gang member to murder Biggie. The hitman carried out the act, shooting and ending Biggie's life while he was on his way home from a party hosted by Vibe magazine. Notably, the documentary also suggests that Knight knew Tupac's shooter and had attended the same school as the alleged hired hitman Keith. Over the years, many fans and celebrities have consistently linked Diddy to Tupac's untimely demise. The situation surrounding these events remains a subject of ongoing intrigue and controversy. In 2018, a potential beef between rapper Eminem and Diddy almost emerged when Eminem made an allegation suggesting that Diddy was responsible for Tupac's demise. During an ongoing feud between Eminem and Machine Gun Kelly, the hip-hop titan released a diss track targeting Kelly. However, in the same track called Kill Shot, Eminem seemingly hinted that Diddy ordered the hit that resulted in Tupac's death back in 1996. Eminem's lyrics on the track include the lines, "But Kells, the day you put out a hit, the day Diddy admits that he put the hit out that got Tupac killed." While later in the track, Eminem concedes that he's just playing with his words. The initial accusation still elicited an immediate reaction from a portion of fans. Some individuals on the internet called for Diddy's indictment based on the controversial lyrics. It's important to note that Eminem's lyrics were part of the ongoing rap feud between him and Machine Gun Kelly and were not necessarily based on factual evidence. The incident, however, reflects the enduring impact of the speculation and conspiracy theories surrounding Tupac's tragic demise, which will continue to captivate the public's attention even years after the events took place. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more videos like this.
Historians studying the Netherlands' history sometimes refer to the 17th century as the Dutch Golden Age. The term refers to an era of unprecedented wealth in the Dutch Republic, when artists such as Rembrandt van Rijn and Johannes Vermeer painted masterpieces and intellectual life flourished in cities like Amsterdam and Delft. But this glittery phrase obscures a dark truth. Many of the Republic's wealthiest residents made their fortunes through the enslavement, sale, and exploitation of African people. However, unlike the Portuguese, the Spanish, Britain, the French, and the USA, whose involvement in the barbaric act of the slave trade is well known, the Dutch hope to bury this truth and continue to deny. Just like the Argentines wiping out their black population and keeping the records off history, the Dutch want the world to forget they ever played a part. In fact, Dutch hagiographers busy themselves by blaming the victims of slavery, claiming that African chiefs sold their people to God-fearing traders from Europe in a bid to make slavery seem like a fair deal. While the small country has done a great deal of hiding its dark past, this video is going to reveal all the dirty secrets and brutality of Dutch slavery that once wiped out African civilizations, tore families apart, and treated human life like cargo to be bought and sold. We are going to reveal the steps Dutch has taken to make restitutions for its dark past. Before we get right into the video, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to keep informed of our eye-opening black narrative. From the early 17th to the mid-19th century, slavery played a fundamental role in the Dutch colonial empire. All overseas possessions of the Dutch depended in varying degrees on the labor of slaves who were imported from diverse and often remote areas. Over the past decades, numerous academic publications have shed light on the history of the Dutch Atlantic slave trade and of slavery in the Dutch Americas. These scholarly contributions, in combination with the social and political activism of the descendants of Caribbean slaves, have helped to bring the subject of slavery into the national public debate. The fact that slavery also played a prominent role in the growth of the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, a prosperous organization notorious for its slave crimes, has seemingly been forgotten. This public ignorance merely reflects the state of academic scholarship on the subject. Slavery has never been a fashionable topic among historians of the VOC, and its general absence in the literature is not an exclusively Dutch phenomenon either. Whenever the topic of slavery is discussed in contemporary society, an instinctively defensive reaction has been to claim that it was always a natural and widely accepted institution among human beings, and that even the tolerant Dutch were unaware of its moral wrongs until the abolitionist movement emerged in the late 18th century. A closer look, however, reveals that argumentation is deceiving at best. First of all, the early modern Dutch, and with them most other Europeans, no longer deemed it morally acceptable to enslave fellow Europeans. Apparently, slave status was only fitting for people of African or Asian descent. Fortunately, the past cannot be hidden forever, and several exposures to the history of the Dutch role in slavery have brought about several changes. The ongoing discussions about an official apology for the Dutch role in slavery, the erection of monuments to commemorate that history, and the inclusion of topics of slavery in the first national history canon are all testimony to this increased attention for a troubled past. In June 2013, the Council of Churches was the first to step up and apologize on the 150th anniversary of the abolition of slavery in the Netherlands. In July 2023, Dutch King Willem-Alexander also offered a formal apology for the Netherlands' historic involvement in slavery and the effects that it still has in the present day. This apology came on the 160th anniversary of the legal abolition of slavery in the Netherlands, including its former colonies in the Caribbean. In his speech, Willem-Alexander said that Dutch ships transported more than 600,000 individuals out of Africa and across the Atlantic, 75,000 of whom did not survive the journey. The monarch also commissioned independent research into his family's involvement in the slave trade, with results expected in 2026. According to a study published in early 2023, the House of Orange-Nassau, the royal house of the Netherlands, made around $600 million in today's money from slavery in the Dutch colonies between 1675 and 1770, including shares in the Dutch East India Company gifted to the family. Willem-Alexander's apology comes in the midst of a larger reckoning with the Netherlands' involvement in the slave trade. In 2022, the country's Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, made a similar apology, acknowledging the Dutch state bears responsibility in the Atlantic slave trade and profited from it. The government also announced a fund of more than $200 million to increase awareness and involvement and follow-up regarding the country's legacy of slavery. The Dutch were not only leading participants in the transatlantic slave trade, they were also the cruelest among the slave masters. During the years 1624 to 1763, the Dutch were the most brutal of slave masters. The Dutch slave code was much harsher than the Spanish code. The savagery of the Dutch code is shown by one provision of calculated cruelty: the burning alive of mutinous slaves over a slow fire. The Dutch had no institution comparable to the Spanish audiencia, a tribunal that included 4 judges. The ruthlessness of the Dutch also created a situation that came to a climax in the Berbice slave rebellion. Berbice was a series of Dutch plantations founded in the mid-18th century in what's now Guyana, named for the river along which the plantations were situated. It was also the site of an astonishing slave rebellion in 1763. After enduring the horrors of being captured and surviving the transatlantic crossing, West African slaves brought to Berbice had to toil in the blazing sun for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, with maybe a day off at Christmas. Disease was rampant, while whippings and torture, even of children, were commonplace. After a localized insurrection was put down in 1762, resentments boiled over a year later. Rebelling slaves began their attacks on a Sunday morning, while the Dutch were at church. The rebelling slaves were led by a man named Coffage. He envisioned a kind of dual state arrangement. The Dutch would stay on their side of the Berbice River, the now free slaves on the other, and the two sides could even establish trade relations. After over a year of fruitless negotiations with the Dutch, internal divisions, and exhausted spirits, a coup was mounted against the leader, Coffage. In keeping with West African tradition, he would take his own life. Today, a 1763 monument of the slave rebel leader Coffage stands in the Square of the Revolution in the Guyanese capital of Georgetown. The Dutch later interrogated hundreds of the surviving slaves, leaving behind exceedingly rare records that reflect the voices of slaves from over 2.5 centuries ago. In all, 124 people were executed. Some of the condemned were to have every bone broken on the rack with an iron bar before dying from either a mercy blow to the heart or a merciless blow to the skull. Others were to be burned at the stake with a regular fire, which took an hour, or with a small fire, where the victims smoldered alive for 4 hours. Some faced the additional torture of having their flesh ripped with hot pincers. The lucky ones were hanged, their heads staked. Sadly, but not surprisingly, slavery remains a taboo subject in the Netherlands, a country that profited so enormously from it. Like most Europeans, the Dutch enjoy only those aspects of history that celebrate themselves. As such, many Dutch people go through school and life learning absolutely nothing about the vast crime that contributed so much to the wealth they now enjoy. Many Dutch historians go as far as denying that Dutch involvement barely had an impact on the slave trade. To truly understand Dutch influence in the slave trade, we need to go back in time and analyze the transatlantic slave trade that lasted centuries. The Dutch and the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was a remarkably straightforward and one-directional migration, the key component of an ingenious triangular commercial system that has been well documented. Ships loaded with a carefully selected assortment of products sailed from diverse ports in Western Europe to the West African coast, where European merchants exchanged these commodities for African slaves sold by local traders. The human cargo was then transported to strategic locations in the Americas before returning home carrying slave-produced commodities such as sugar, coffee, and tobacco to the European market. It was a good example of the emergence of global trade in the early modern period. If the voyage went as planned, and this included keeping slave mortality on board to a minimum, investors stood to profit from several transactions. For the African victims, the Middle Passage was merely one part of their tragic journey to the Americas. First, they experienced enslavement, coerced transportation, and confinement in Africa itself, before being sold to what must have seemed strange white men who subsequently moved them under excruciating circumstances across the Atlantic Ocean. Finally, after disembarking in the Americas, they often faced further regional trading and transport. For the great majority of them, back-breaking labor on large commercial plantations under the tropical sun loomed as the final destination. The forced alienation of those who survived this initial ordeal undeniably impacted their identity, from local or tribal affiliations within Africa to a more diffuse African identity versus the Europeans on board, and with the passage of time, to the birth of uniquely African American slave cultures. Due to its highly organized and business-like character, with slave embarkation, mortality, and disembarkation being meticulously registered, historians have been left with large amounts of administrative evidence from which the business, volume, and direction of the transatlantic slave trade can be reconstructed. At present, there are 1,237 officially documented Dutch slave voyages, with a total of 408,658 slaves departing from Africa. However, the actual numbers are an estimated total of 554,300 slaves exported by the Dutch, or roughly 4.4% of the overall volume of the transatlantic slave trade. And of these slaves, around 475,200 reached the Americas alive with a mortality rate of 14.3%. However, there are other accounts that state that more were transported. Despite the inherent subjectivity of all assumptions, extrapolations, and estimations involved, historians generally agree that slightly more than 500,000 Africans were transported on Dutch ships, with somewhere between 50,000 to 100,000 slaves perishing before they reached the New World. Given that their commercial activities on the African coast dated back to the mid-1590s, the Dutch waited several decades before actively participating in the slave trade. Initially, Dutch African trade was primarily focused on gold, and to a much lesser extent, ivory. Their first official settlement on the African coast, Fort Nassau at Maury on the Gold Coast, did not spark any serious slaving activities either. This hesitation can be attributed to the fact that the Dutch still lacked a suitable American colony with a strong demand for slave labor. As the rise of Dutch colonial expansion was closely tied to the enduring conflict with Spain, as well as with Portugal since 1580, Iberian shipping became fair game for Dutch privateers. The capture of Portuguese slave ships in and around the Atlantic Ocean resulted in what has been labeled an incidental slave trade. Slaves carried by the enemy were defined as contraband, and when possible, sold to the nearest friendly buyer. The conquest of Pernambuco and several other Portuguese captaincies in northeast Brazil during the early 1630s handed the Dutch West India Company, or WIC, the richest sugar-producing area in the world, and a full-blown slave society at that. The company officials soon came to the realization that without slaves, sugar cultivation was in danger. After the surrounding rural areas were sufficiently pacified, the WIC began expanding its commercial interests on the African coast by simply conquering long-established Portuguese trading posts. Earlier attempts to do so had failed miserably, but victories at Arguin in 1633, Elmina in 1637, and Sao Paulo de Luanda and Sao Tome in 1641 guaranteed an unprecedented Dutch dominance on the African coast. Never would the Dutch have easier access to slaves than during the 1640s. The history of Dutch Brazil can be divided into three acts. First, the conquest and consolidation of a sizable territory for sugar cultivation, followed by a decade of relative peace and prosperity under the enlightened governorship of Johan Maurits van Nassau, and finally, renewed warfare with the local Portuguese colonists, leading to the ultimate surrender of the colony in 1654. During the government of Maurits, thousands of slaves were imported by the WIC, heralding the official involvement by the Dutch in the transatlantic slave trade. At first, these slaves were mainly procured from the Calabar region, which is the Slave Coast, Bight of Benin, and Bight of Biafra, and the region north of the Congo River. But the Dutch, fueled by the traditional preferences of the Portuguese Brazilian sugar planters for Angolan slaves, would take the main port of Luanda in 1641. The increasing volume of slave imports and sugar exports in the 1640s came to a sudden halt when open hostilities broke out shortly after Maury had returned to Europe. Everywhere sugar plantations and mills were burned to the ground or halted their production. The Dutch slave trade to Brazil may have generated less of a historic impact than the few incidental slaves delivered to other locations in the New World in the previous decades. The Dutch did introduce more slaves from West Africa to Brazil, primarily from the Slave Coast, thereby perhaps introducing the first Igbo from the Bight of Biafra in Pernambuco as well. War undoubtedly had a dramatic but also liberating effect on the lives of slaves in Brazil. New slaves arriving from Angola could no longer be sold or fed by the company. The Hoga Rod in Recife begged its WIC colleagues in Luanda to stop sending slaves across the Atlantic, and those who had already arrived were now redirected north. In January 1646, the Tamandare sailed with a cargo of slaves from Fernando da Noronha via Barbados to New Amsterdam. The relative ease with which this merchandise was sold appeared as a harbinger of things to come. With Dutch Brazil sliding into the chaos of civil war in the mid-1640s, the WIC faced a dilemma. What should be done about the slave trade, especially after its short-lived supremacy on the African coast was eroded when the Portuguese recaptured Luanda and Sao Tome in 1648, and the English slaving activities were expanding. To resolve this, the Dutch would open new markets for slaves in the English and French Caribbean by introducing slave-based sugar cultivation closely resembling the Brazilian model. The first Navigation Act in 1651, established under Cromwell, was mainly intended to suppress Dutch trade to the English colonies and fueled the growing animosity between the two maritime superpowers, eventually leading to 3 naval wars between 1652 and 1674. Increasingly stifled by the mercantilist policies of England and France, the Dutch looked, ironically perhaps, to the colonies of their former enemy Spain to provide new markets for the slave trade. Between 1646 and 1657, Dutch traders sold about 3,800 slaves to Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico, and Tierra Firme, while between 1657 and 1663, 14 Dutch slave ships arrived at Buenos Aires in the Rio de la Plata region alone. It is in this volatile arena that the emergence of Curaçao as a slave trade entrepot for the Spanish Americas should be situated. No longer useful as a military base now that the war with Spain had ended and never entirely suited for commercial plantation agriculture, the company was desperately looking for another niche. For the next half-century, Curaçao would take advantage of the Asiento trade, receiving saltwater slaves from Africa and distributing them to the Spanish Americas according to contracts made in Europe. The Asiento contracts were renewed and reconfigured several times during the second half of the 17th century, thereby consolidating the Dutch position as a major player in the transatlantic slave trade. Altogether, almost 100,000 slaves, or roughly 20% of the entire Dutch slave trade, accordingly found their way to the Spanish Americas between 1658 and 1729, with a sizable number from the slave coast, thus further diversifying the ethnic makeup of the Spanish colonies. Except for their short layover at Curaçao and their impact on the island economy, most of these Africans quickly disappeared from the Dutch colonial realm. And while this transit trade enhanced the historic reputation of the Dutch as slave traders, the slaves themselves ended up in Spanish, not Dutch colonies, with Curaçao evolving into Amsterdam's Caribbean counterpart. Other Dutch colonies in the Americas received slaves only sparingly during the 1650s and 1660s. Governor Peter Stuyvesant of New Netherland repeatedly requested slaves from Curaçao, but only a few actually arrived. Sound business acumen, not national solidarity, ensured that most surplus or refuse slaves were sold closer to home, and usually at much better prices. New Netherland simply could not compete with the Caribbean plantation colonies in their demand for slave labor. Of the 2 large slave cargoes arriving in New Amsterdam, most of the slaves of Het Witte Paard were quickly resold to tobacco planters in the Chesapeake, and the 290 slaves disembarking from the Gideon were just in time to witness the peaceful surrender of New Amsterdam to the English. New Netherland was by all accounts never more than a peripheral destination in the slave trade, even if the small stream of slaves arriving would lay the foundation of a vibrant African-American community. The Peace of Breda, settling the Second Anglo-Dutch War and swapping New Netherland for Suriname, would greatly impact the future of the Dutch transatlantic slave trade. For the next century and a half, the Dutch colonial possessions in the Americas would remain largely unchanged. One could even say that the failed colonization of New Holland, or Dutch Brazil, and New Netherland, which is Dutch New York, made the WIC domain leaner and meaner, and heavily concentrated on the lower Caribbean. This suited the financial and structural reorganization of the company in the early 1670s very well. With Curaçao now in its golden age as a slave trade entrepot to the Spanish Americas, and with Suriname emerging as the quintessential Dutch plantation colony, the future opportunities for the slave trade looked promising. Curaçao and Suriname were the primary beneficiaries of the Dutch slave trade in this period, receiving almost equal numbers, with the crucial difference being that most slaves to Curaçao were transferred to Spanish colonies, while Suriname functioned as an end destination. Between 1676 and 1716, over 42,000 African slaves arriving at Curaçao were distributed among Spanish traders. When, after the War of Spanish Succession from 1702 to 1713, the Asiento contracts fell squarely into English hands, the slave trade to Curaçao rapidly declined. Not only did this have immediate effects on the island's economy and the activities of the local company slaves, but it would result in a rapid creolization of its African-American population and the sustained growth of a free black community, during the 1730s, the WIC relinquished its monopoly on the transatlantic slave trade, leading to the emergence of a large private slave trade and the end of its illegal forerunners, the interlopers. Companies such as the Middelburgsche Commercie Compagnie, or MCC, and the Rotterdam-based firm of Rochussen were now mainly responsible for delivering slaves to Suriname and the smaller Dutch plantation colonies on the wild coast like Berbice, Essequibo, and Demerara. As a consequence, the historic connections between Zeeland and the wild coast were rekindled, with almost 80% of the Dutch private slave trade organized by companies from that maritime province. The extent to which this trade expanded dramatically in the mid-18th century, before decreasing just as rapidly during the latter decades, becomes evident due to the state of the Suriname Plantation Society itself, which suffered from a financial crisis and limited profitability, partly related to the continuous resistance of the Maroon communities. It was also due to the general decline of the Dutch Republic, no longer a major player in Europe, with English supremacy in the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War confirming the loss of their maritime prowess. The inability of the Dutch to keep pace with economic developments was quickly answered by increased British and U.S. slave trading activities. The U.S. and English would take over with a total of 7,011 slaves arriving in Suriname on U.S. ships during the 1780s and 1790s, with the British focusing predominantly on Essequibo and Demerara, especially after occupying these colonies in 1795. The colonies were shortly returned to the Dutch during the era of the Batavian Republic from 1795 to 1805, much to the chagrin of even the Dutch planters. A total of 6 Dutch slave voyages in 1802 to 1803 delivered an estimated 1,287 slaves to Suriname. More than 6 decades later, slavery would be abolished by the Dutch. While the Netherlands marked formally abolished slavery in 1863, it took another 10 years before the slaves began to enjoy their freedom. Slavery would continue for another decade, as many enslaved people were forced to work on plantations to limit financial losses for the owners. Therefore, many descendants of the slaves consider 1873, not 1863, as the date of abolition. In contrast, England proclaimed abolition in 1834, France in 1848, and the USA in 1865. So, the Netherlands was one of the last countries to abolish the abhorrent crime. Students of history will also remember that in Africa, the Dutch were also the last to decolonize in South Africa. The Dutch king making a shocking apology for Dutch participation in the barbaric slave trade, and other acts to make slavery well known to the Dutch, come in response to critics pushing for the Netherlands to speak up about its part in the brutal history of slavery rather than hide from the truth. Hopefully, the Portuguese, the Spanish, Belgium, the USA, the French, and Britain would follow suit and make restitutions for centuries of slavery and poverty inflicted on the African communities within their countries and on the African continent. As always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos to let more people know the truth about blacks and to hear their own part of the narratives. Thanks for watching.
It was within this tumultuous context that the Klan's intentions and actions began to take a really chilling turn, which I've always wondered, like, what the heck does that name mean? I felt like it had to mean something really evil. Did you know that the Klan... And it was within this tumultuous context that the Klan's intentions and actions began to take a really chilling turn, which I've always wondered, like, what the heck does that name mean? I felt like it had to mean something really evil. Did you know that the Klan had a mail order catalog for their regalia The Klan was so powerful in Southern California that they nicknamed Anaheim Klanaheim. What? I wasn't totally sure where they came from, why were they wearing those outfits, what's with the name. When the country is going through a tumultuous time, when there's a lot of change, a lot of times we turn on each other and we try to point the finger and say, this is happening because of who they are, and if we just had those people gone, everything would be okay. So brace yourself for a glimpse into a time when secret societies were thriving and the origin of the Ku Klux Klan was taking shape against the backdrop of a nation who was searching for her identity and purpose. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero, and I'm so glad you're here with me on my channel, where I've been digging into my family's hidden heritage. Now, my family was in the Deep South before the Civil War as enslaved people, during the Civil War, and during the Jim Crow era. My family are also like devout Catholics. But being from New York, I don't think I really had a grasp on what the deal was with that, right? Like you knew it had to do with racism and you knew that there was a lot of violence. I wasn't totally sure where they came from, why were they wearing those outfits, what's with the name. So as we embark on this journey into the heart of the Klan's beginnings, it becomes clear that the early motivations, no matter what they were far from ordinary. This was not a knitting circle, right? And it was actually really intertwined with this period of American history, which was known as the Golden Age of Fraternalism. Basically, here in America, this rise of clubs and secret societies just kind of took over. From the Freemasons to the Odd Fellows, there were orders that just captured people's imagination and made them feel like they were a part of something bigger than just themselves. So amidst this tapestry of secret societies, a peculiar group emerged in a small town of Pulaski, Tennessee. Pulaski, I've actually been there. So I've been to the hometown of the KKK. I didn't realize it at the time. And it's not that far from where I live here in Nashville. Imagine a picturesque southern town with its charming main street adorned with mom and pop shops leading to a small town square, Pulaski, Tennessee. A place that holds the key to unraveling this secret society's enigma. It all began on a fateful Christmas Eve in 1865 when 6 Confederate veterans gathered in Pulaski to birth the society known as the Ku Klux Klan. Yes, the infamous KKK. They were downright strange. They devised a hierarchy with bizarre titles like the Grand Cyclops and the Grand Magi, deliberately avoiding any political or military connotations in the name. And the members, they referred to themselves as ghouls. The name Ku Klux Klan was derived from the Greek word kuklos, which means circle, and the Scottish Gaelic word clan, which was, I'm assuming, chosen for the sake of alliteration. Which I've always wondered, like, what the heck does that name mean? I felt like it had to mean something really evil. The founders drew inspiration from rituals and rules of these 2 defunct orders, the Sons of Malta and Ku Klux Adelphim. These societies, some say, were actually influenced by Mardi Gras traditions in New Orleans and Alabama. The connection to the Knights of the Golden Circle, which was an older and more secretive society that promoted the preservation of slavery, has also been suggested as a possible influence on the Klan. But the founders didn't stop there. They decided to make a grand entrance, disguising themselves in sheets and parading through the streets of Pulaski on horseback, and they caused quite a commotion. But little did they know that this act of showmanship would become the iconic regalia of the Klan. The strangeness didn't end there. They had like bizarre, weird ceremonies. They would blindfold new members, subjecting them to silly oaths and rough handling, and finally bring them before a, quote, royal altar. And what awaited them there? A mirror and a pair of donkey ears as a royal crown. It was all meant for amusement. Quote, only this and nothing more, as one account put it. The adoption of peculiar regalia served a dual purpose. First, it added the theatrical element to their secretive gatherings, creating an aura of intrigue and mystique. Second, it allowed the members to conceal their identities. These initiation rituals resembled college fraternity hazing, and it was far from the menacing image that we associate with the Klan today. However, the story took a chilling turn as the Klan expanded and members started coming from other towns and bringing different ideas. It's through the town square in their weird outfits. actually turned into a weapon of intimidation and violence against the newly emancipated African Americans who sought to exercise their rights and freedoms as American citizens. Because it was founded by 6 ex-Confederate soldiers. I feel like you hear that and you're like, okay, this may have been founded with other motivations. But I feel like there's conflicting information about that. So the original Ku Klux Klan from 1865 bore little resemblance to the organization that we remember today. Initially, the Klan didn't don pointed hoods or white robes that later became their iconic attire, nor did they do the cross burnings. That actually didn't happen until the 1915 reboot of the Klan. Their true purpose, people say, remains a mystery, with speculations ranging from carrying on the Confederate cause, which I think is a good assumption, to simply being a group of rowdy troublemakers that were looking for something to do in a small southern town after the destruction of the Civil War. The strange names, the peculiar attire, and the enigmatic rituals would later unveil the dangerous consequences of exploiting societal fears and the power of a group to respond to those. The Klan's formation coincided with a period of significant societal upheaval, the Reconstruction era, which was unfolding after the Civil War. Now, this is obviously, like, we look back and we're saying, like, I'm so glad all these people of color were freed and they've been emancipated, but we have to understand, like, what were they being emancipated into? There is a society set up that was not made or prepared to include these people. A lot of people who were not happy about it. It's within this tumultuous context that the Klan's intentions and actions began to take a really chilling turn. If you know Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest, there was a huge to-do about him recently because there was a big sculpture of him on his horse here in Nashville, and I would drive by it all the time. And then it ended up getting toppled down, and it's gone because of his ties to the Confederacy. But there's something really interesting about it. So he was the KKK's first Grand Wizard, but in 1869, he actually tried to disband the KKK because he grew critical of the Klan's excessive violence. I want to read a quote from this crazy book I found online. You can actually read the book yourself. Historic Pulaski, the Birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. And so I actually read through this book. It was photocopied online. I'll link to it below. And it's this old book where this person is just kind of explaining from the perspective of someone from Pulaski, like, what was happening with the Klan. And so this is what they say. Quote, each member was required to provide himself with the following outfit: a white mask for the face with orifices for the eyes and nose, a tall, fantastic cardboard hat, so constructed as to increase the wearer's apparent height, a gown or a robe of sufficient length to cover the entire person. No particular color or material was prescribed. These were left to the individual's taste and fancy, and each selected what in his judgment would be the most hideous and fantastic, with the aim of inspiring the greatest amount of curiosity in the novice. These robes of different colors, often of the most flashy patterns, added vastly to the grotesque appearance of the assembled Klan. The object of all of this was amusement, only this and nothing more. The claim is that the whole purpose of this was kind of just amusement for these people to be a part of a secret society. So what happened? You know, I think obviously there was something else going on, because if you have a tennis club, your tennis club is not going to suddenly become an insane terrorist cell, right? That's just murdering and running wild across the entire country for decades. Like, something happened here. What happened? Well, while the Klan's early motivations may have been shrouded in ambiguity, its transformation to a force of terror can't be ignored. As the Klan expanded its reach and attracted new members from neighboring towns, its focus shifted somewhere along the line, from eccentric amusement to sinister oppression. The very regalia that once held an air of intrigue and mystique now became a symbol of intimidation and violence. The Klan's iconic white robes, masks, and conical hats struck fear into the hearts of their victims. They, later on, referred to themselves as the, quote, invisible empire of the South, lurking in the shadows and spreading terror wherever they went. Now, by 1869, so this is 4 years after the beginning of the Klan, their activities escalate to unspeakable acts of violence, including house burnings, property destruction, and outright murder. The chaos seemed unstoppable. President Ulysses S. Grant actually had to declare martial law because this was getting so out of hand. The Ku Klux Klan Act marked a pivotal moment in U.S. history because it was the first piece of legislation that made individuals and states punishable under federal law for hate crimes and racial discrimination. Now, what's really fascinating about this is we think about, for me, I think about racial discrimination. I think about the Jim Crow segregation era, right? We're talking like 1920s, 1930s, all the way up until the civil rights movements in the 50s and 60s. Well, in 1871, Ulysses S. Grant is saying there can't be crimes based on someone's race. So it's like, where did we go wrong? What happened, right, between then and the 1930s? Some state militias actually dismantled Klan chapters and made arrests, but the Klan's power never totally went away. With the end of Reconstruction, 1877, things started to settle down a little bit, and the Klan kind of like went into hibernation. But there was a huge revival in the 20th century, and this is the era where, like, when you think about the KKK, like, this is the era you're probably thinking about. It was attached to the time of Jim Crow laws, which entrenched segregation and erected barriers to impede African Americans, in particular from their right to vote. The Klan experienced a revival in the 20th century, fueled by its glorification in a controversial film called The Birth of a Nation. I'm gonna give this film too much screen time here, but this is when, like, you start seeing the organized Klan happening. So if before we had like a weird homespun offshoot kind of a thing, this is a much more organized and monolithic Klan. And how did all the Klan members end up getting their hoods? And like, how do you guys all have the same outfit on? Well, a traveling organizer for several fraternal orders, including the Klan, saw the opportunity in the commercial success of the movie Birth of a Nation and started selling these hoods and robes in 1920. By 1921, the Klan began mass producing this costume, even publishing, quote, a sumptuous full-color mail-order catalog, according to one source. The Klan expanded its targets, though, beyond just African Americans and extended this prejudice and bigotry to Catholics and Jewish immigrants. So in my mind, when I remember learning about the Klan, I was thinking, well, they were killing Black people. That's what they were doing, right? They were killing African American people, people of color. I didn't know they were going after Catholics, like Italians. I didn't know that they were, going after Jewish immigrants. I'm sure other people as well. And contrary to popular belief, the Klan's power was actually way beyond the rural South. Like, in my mind, we're talking like backwoods South, kind of just away from cities, and we have people who are just still holding on to these racist ideas. No. In the 1920s, it was a national movement with tens of thousands of members. They had such political influence at the time, and I mean, in urban centers around the country. This second Klan, was national in scope. And its highest per capita state memberships were in Indiana and Oregon. The Klan was so powerful in Southern California that they nicknamed Anaheim Klanaheim. What? Can you believe that? Like, that's not the Klan that I understood. You actually wouldn't believe how integrated the Klan was in American culture in the 19th.
Person who's been researching the history of the KKK, dark secrets of the KKK.
Where did you get that list? Why do you have all my search information?
Are you worried about someone getting a hold of your search history? Do you have a VPN?
That Atlas VPN blocks all the malicious links, ads, and trackers, and notifies you when someone is trying to steal your data. It's the ultimate solution to online privacy, no matter what weird topic you're researching this week. They sponsored this video so I could give you the same protection that I use when I'm researching the less savory parts of American history. This is the best VPN deal on the market. Enjoy the most affordable online protection for just $1.83 a month, plus 3 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect unlimited devices, all with a single subscription. Go to the pinned link below and use the discount code during checkout. Embrace your curiosity without getting on someone's weird list or something. I found out that the Klan sponsored baseball teams, and in 1927, one of the Klan's baseball teams played the Hebrew All-Star game in Washington, D.C. I was like, I don't even know what to do with that information. They were in county fairs. There was a photo of Klansmen in full hooded regalia on a Ferris wheel in Colorado. They were part of college fraternities and beauty pageants, according to one article, in which young women competed for the title of Miss 100% America. What? What? But the main focus was always spreading hatred against African Americans, Jews, Catholics, but the agenda would always fit the local context. In the Southwest, it turned its ire on Hispanics and Latino immigrants. In the Pacific Northwest, it took aim at the Japanese. For lack of a better word, like how far-reaching and diverse the Klan really was. And today, while the Klan's power has diminished, remnants of it still exist in splinter groups around the country with an estimated 6,000 to 8,000 active members. Now, Pulaski, Tennessee, the birthplace of the Klan, bears the weight of its dark history. I read some articles where they were people from the town and then the local government were saying that they don't want that to be the first thing that you see when you look at Pulaski, Tennessee, and they're hoping that they can slowly shift the focus away from that. White supremacists have attempted to make it a pilgrimage site. And there was like a little plaque saying like, this is where the Klan began, blah, blah, blah. And what they actually did is they took that plaque and they turned it around and they nailed it to the wall so that no one could read that anymore. So it would stop becoming a pilgrimage site for people and kind of just this outward public rejection of this part of their story. You know, the story of Ku Klux Klan is a haunting reminder, I think, of the dangers that can arise when people are manipulated by fear and hatred. There were certain individuals that recognized the potential of harnessing this groupthink mentality and being able to kind of influence people. And there's power when we come together in a group. And wherever there is this potential power, there's also going to be people who come along and try to manipulate us. And sometimes without our knowledge of what's even going on before it's too late.
Hey yo, thanks for tuning in to Celeb Source, your source for celeb news. Now today we have, hey yo man, we got Lizzo with the strong message, man. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna talk about what she got to say, man. You know what I mean? We got Boosie talking about Kodak Black. We also got Method Man explaining why he never wanted to be a sex symbol. Alright? We got artists being murdered and security guard groping Beyonce. Again, thanks for tuning in to Celeb Source Show. If this is your first time to the channel, man, be sure to hit that like button if you feel any part of the content. We definitely appreciate that. That notification bell's waiting for your taps. Going to get the tap and that subscribe button's waiting for your subscription, man. So go on and touch that too. Let's get right to it, man. Setting it off with this security guard, man. Listen, security guard is being accused by members of the Beehive of copping a cheap feel on the Queen's behind. You see what I'm saying? Now, I look pretty closely at the video, and I don't quite see the offense that everybody sees, like in the same manner. You know what I mean? Just take a look and let me know what you think. Take a look at this vid real quick and let me know how you see it. Take a look. So let me get this straight. She needs help getting down from what looks like a trailer. I'm trying to figure out how the hell, like, what the hell was she doing up at the top of the trailer, what the hell was she doing up at the top of the trailer in the first place? You see what I'm saying? That's like walking by a tree and hearing somebody whisper to you from a branch of said tree, and they between two beehives talking about, hey, yo, you got some tissue? Tissue? What the hell is you doing up at the top of the trailer? You see what I'm saying? And why are your cheeks out? Never mind all that. She needs to get help getting down off the trailer, right? Dude extends a helping hand, and dude more or less cradled her behind. You see what I'm saying? Now, had the palm of his hand squoze, is that a word? Squoze? Like squeeze, past tense? You like, it ain't squeezed? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Ain't it froze? My bad. Listen, had the palm of his hand squoze her cheek, then the dude is scum. You see what I'm saying? But he more or less made his hand a seat. It's like something like I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing it. But let me tell you this. The man was never seen nor heard from again by me. Okay? Now, honestly, I think the man was just trying to help her down. And because of what she was, like, if she had on a pair of pants, you might not have said he was trying to cop a feel. But because she had both of the cheeks out, it was a weird costume. Wasn't it a weird costume? Anyway, listen up, man. An artist by the name of I guess, we haven't heard what Beyonce had to say about that, so we'll wait and see what if anything transpires from that. An artist by the name of 350 Heem was murdered at his own mixtape party. Okay, the artist and a 48-year-old woman were both gunned down outside the Jade Fox Lounge in Lakeland, Florida, where the party for his mixtape, Taking Chances, was held. Now, I did say gunned down, but both of them were not gunned down. Only he was. Now, both of them were shot. 25-year-old and the 48-year-old, okay? The 48-year-old survived, but the 25-year-old artist, 350 Heem, did not survive, okay? Now, his brother is a former NBA basketball player by the name of Dwayne Bacon. This is horrible stuff right here, man. You know what I'm saying? A 23-year-old woman by the name of Jamila Johnson was arrested in connection to the shooting and has so far been charged with being a felon in possession of a weapon. That's right. The ladies are turning into savages, fellas. You know what I'm saying? Right alongside us. Okay? Prayers up for the culture, man. It can't be this bad. Listen up. Method Man has explained that it was never his intention to become a sex symbol. You're like, wait, who said he was a sex? Ask your lady. Ask your lady, okay? Look, you'd be surprised. Your lady be like, I always like the way he slurped during his rhymes. You know what I'm saying? And then you'll understand. You be looking at your lady like, you low-key freaky, ain't you? I love it. Anyway, Method Man has stated the following. During an interview in Men's Health, he said, look what he said. He said, put the words, sex symbol. I guess they asked him about being a sex symbol. He said, put the words together, sex and symbol. Yeah, I think that's what it is, man. He said, what's the symbol? I'm not doing anything. So what's the symbol? I don't want to be that guy. You get to a certain age where you just stop caring. And I think that's the sexiest thing in the world, right there. Close quote. I felt that. You know what I'm saying? And that is to say, when you don't care, like, that is completely when you go Super Saiyan. You're like, what? I'm saying, like, when you, like Vegeta. You're like, what? I'm saying, when you don't care anymore, that is like your highest moment. I'm not saying you don't care about people. It's just that you don't care about, like, folks, you don't care about trying to impress people as much. You know what I mean? You're just focused on what you're supposed to be doing, and you're focused on fulfilling your objective. That, I believe, is what makes a person sexy. You know what I'm saying? Not when you're busy trying to placate and be this sexy thing. That's not sexy at all. That just looks like you're needy for attention. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, I get, you know what I'm saying? I feel like I understand what he's saying. You know what I mean? All right, look, this video's going out to Source super late. So this is gonna be a short video, and I mean that. Yeah, I know you're checking the time, but see it's short? You see how short the video is? Let me do my shout outs real quick. Let me do my shout outs, and I'm gonna be out your hair. You know what I mean? Shout out to New York peeps. New York peeps is good people, man. Always taking care of my people, man. Remember I told you my boy had the blood cancer and stuff like that? Well, my boy Josh, he had the blood cancer, man. New York Peace is always taking care, like, New York Peace is always holding my boy down, man. And I really appreciate New York Peace for that, man. I know you don't want me to say anything, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you deserve blessings and blessings on top of blessings. I appreciate you. New York Peace said, another great video. Good night, family. Rest well with the peace of the Lord. Tuck it in today and no worries for tomorrow. That's what I'm talking about. No worries for tomorrow, man. I'm trying to look up the scriptures. I'm trying to do my study on all the scriptures where the Most High says, do not be afraid. Do not fear. In other words, don't worry about anything. Let me tell you something. That's the number one thing the Most High is always telling us, man. Don't be afraid. We need to be a culture full of people. They're not brash. I'm just saying a culture of people that are just not cowardly. You know what I mean? And let me tell you something. When you commit crime, you're cowardly. Because what do you do after you commit crime? You run and you hide. Don't commit crime. You see what I'm saying? Because chances are, if you commit crime, you're going to be very cowardly about it. Because you're going to commit your crime in secret. Right? They commit crimes in secret. Where we at over here? I had another shout out. Okay, Rocco to London, says Celeb. You saying the most feared men in hip-hop. Who, Jay-Z? You trolling or being serious? Because ain't nobody scared of Jay-Z. You know, I just tell y'all about not being afraid. That's what I'm talking about. Listen. I just want to throw something out here about the titles of our videos, okay? The titles let you know who's, just for the new people. The titles let you know who is in the video. Don't be taking with very loose interpretation, okay? Don't go ham with it. We just let you know this people gonna probably be in the video, alright? Or someone related to them, but most likely them. Suelo said, I think I watched the whole show just to hear, and finally. I felt that. Sometimes I do the video just for that. You know what I'm saying? Alright, let's wrap this bad boy up, okay? Now, yesterday we reported to you that the YouTuber 1090 Jake and Kodak Black have been having a back and forth concerning who is a snitch, okay? We posted a vid yesterday with Kodak Black damn near spitting a 7-minute message, leaving folks scratching their head as to whether they really understand the English language, all right? Everybody from Florida, though, they fully understood what was going on, okay? One of the things mentioned from Jake is him saying, quote, he said, he's talking to Kodak. He said, when you was a one-man army in the feds, you were rocking behind the Bloods, and then you just did a song with the biggest rat, Tekashi 6ix9ine, and that ratted on the Bloods. Now, I didn't even say nothing about this dude saying that you was in protective custody in the feds, and you never even hit the yard in Big Sandy. Close quote. Now, it appears, right, that Boosie, who doesn't love the fact that Kodak worked with 6ix9ine, chimed in, and Boosie posted, quote, he said, BG says he was in protective custody too. Close quote. So, if I'm in prison and there's 30 people from a gang that would love to hurt me, it's weak for me to be in protective custody. You see what I'm saying? It's weak for the police to put me in protective custody. You're like, no, celeb. It's weak to act like you run a dish while you in protective custody. Oh, touche. And finally, you know, I tell you it's gonna be fast. I'll tell you it's a quick video today. Listen, Lizzo has finally provided a response in the midst of the lawsuits that have been filed against her. Now, if you haven't been tuning into the channel, 3 of Lizzo's dancers have filed lawsuits against her, stating that they've been body shamed for their weight and they were asked to do unscrupulous things involving dances in birthday suits and eating bananas, like literal bananas, out of weird places, okay? Now, Lizzo has provided her response to everything that has been going down. She posted this. This is what she said. She said, quote, I'm devastated after hearing these fabricated claims made against me. These are sensationalized stories from people I gave opportunities to. The allegations are as unbelievable as they sound. These former employees have already publicly admitted that they were told that their behavior on tour was inappropriate, where am I, and unprofessional. Usually I choose not to respond to false allegations, but these are too outrageous not to be addressed. I'm hurt, but I will not let the good work I've done in the world be overshadowed by this. I want to thank everyone who has reached out in support to lift me up during this difficult time. Is that thunder? Oh gosh, I definitely got to hurry up. So, at this point, right, it's her word against their word. They're saying she did something. She's saying, yo, I ain't never did anything of the sort. All right? And this is where they are. Now, look, the folks speaking against her are not the only ones filing the lawsuit. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me rephrase that. The folks speaking against her are not the only ones, are not only the ones that filed the lawsuit. You see what I'm saying? In other words, people have filed the lawsuit, and then there are a whole group of separate people that are saying the same thing, okay? People that are not a part of the suit, echoing what the dancers are saying. So here's the thing. Here's what we got to do. We are going to ask the professor and lawyer / legal analyst, Dmitry Shakhnovich, to shed some light on whether the dancers stand a chance in this lawsuit. Mr. Shakhnovich, what are your thoughts on this whole Lizzo situation? Take a listen to what Mr. Shakhnovich got to say.
All right, folks, let's talk about this Lizzo sexual harassment lawsuit. My name is Dmitry Shakhnovich. I'm a lawyer and professor here in New York City. Also run a YouTube channel, youtube.com/@dshacklaw. If you're interested, take a look. I'd appreciate it. Lizzo was sued by her employees, right, dancers, that alleged that she had forced them to engage in really deviant sexual behavior, sexual acts, while on tour in the course of their employment. This is called a hostile work environment lawsuit, right? A hostile work environment lawsuit is effectively an employment discrimination / harassment lawsuit, right? And typically, the plaintiffs in a case like this would have to prove three things. Number one, they'd have to prove discrimination, right? Which may include harassment. And this is certainly vicious conduct that is being alleged here. We'll see what is proven down the line, right? The conduct must have been unreasonably offensive, and it must have been part of a pattern. In other words, one or two isolated incidents would not be sufficient to prove and win a lawsuit like this. Now, there are a few moving parts here, right? Number one, the allegations arise out of conduct in Amsterdam, right? The implication is that if this was part of a larger picture in terms of the employer-employee relationship, some of that conduct perhaps arose in the United States. It'll remain to be seen what the evidence shows, right? And that's what's really important here, the evidence. What was filed thus far is a lawsuit, a complaint, right? And that includes allegations, and the allegations sound bad. But what's important is the evidence. What will come out in the coming weeks, months, beyond that, to prove this case or disprove this case, right? What will come out in the documentary evidence, in the physical evidence? Is there photographic or videographic evidence? What will be said at the depositions? Who will be the witnesses that come out and testify? At the end of the day, this is a case that may come down to what's called credibility, right? Believability. Which side is more believable? Which side will a judge or a jury find more credible down the line? And a lot of that, again, depends on the evidence. What will come out as this case progresses? What will come out in the motions? What will come out in the depositions? What will come out at possibly an eventual trial, right? Remember, the elements here, again, there must have been unreasonably offensive conduct, harassment, discrimination, that was ongoing, part of a pattern, right? The evidence must show that as this case progresses. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as this case gets closer to that stage. Once again, guys, my name is Dmitry Shakhnovich, youtube.com/@dshacklaw. Please take a look. Thank you.
You like, I'm trying to file a lawsuit my damn self. What'd he say his name was? The man's name is Dmitry Shakhnovich. You see what I'm saying? Of the law firm of Dmitry Shakhnovich. Listen, this guy's official, okay? That man's law school stripes have taken him from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office to the offices of numerous high-profile criminal defense attorneys. You know what I'm saying? Working like alongside folks that worked on the John Gotti case, man. Look, this man has been sought out, right? by some of the most well-recognized publications. 1010 Wins, ABC, BET, Bleacher Report, CBS, Huffington Post, The Jewish Voice, Los Angeles Times, MSNBC, New York Daily News, New York Post. This dude, the list goes on. Wall Street Journal. You see what I'm saying? Yahoo News. And my man said, celeb source, if you need me, let me know. You know what I'm saying? Look, this man consistently was selected to Super Lawyers magazine for the New York City area. You know what I'm saying? You like, yo, is this paid promotion? No, it is not. It is real, recognizing real. And look, he got a YouTube page too, man, so you might have to check that out. I'm gonna put the link to his page in the description. You know what I'm saying? Since he's helping your boy out. And I'm gonna need y'all to help him out by simply clicking the link to his channel. You know what I'm saying? And subscribing to the channel. You know what I'm saying? And then look, you're gonna get wiser and you're gonna know a little bit more about the law. You follow what I'm saying, man? Because ignorance is no excuse for the law. You know what I'm saying? Don't ever say we ain't looked out for you, man. Yo, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think this lawsuit with Lizzo is about to play out? Because this is some really hairy stuff. You know what I'm saying? You like, yeah, hairy like them bananas. Hey, come on, man. I can't believe you would say something like that. That's low-key disgusting. But I'm dying to know what y'all think about it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for tuning in to Celeb Source. Your source, Celeb News.
Prince, good morning, good morning. Just looked a moment ago, I didn't see a comment. It's because you just texted it. What's going on, man? I'm at the end of my day. What you got going on? Starting yours. You just stopped in the studio. Yeah, I'm about to play some video games and fall asleep. I'm just getting back in from work. Sat here and checked like 3 different documentaries. The intensity of the intake of the information's hitting me like, oh shit. But all the same, glad you stopped in. And I bid you a good weekend and day. I am up out of here. So, stay safe, stay smart, stay up. And I'll catch you on the next one. Peace, bro. I'll let you have that moment to text. The toxicity of Call of Duty keep me up for just a little bit.
Peace out, brother.